15 years of marriage. 15 years of shared dreams, struggles, and laughter. Jake had never imagined that everything he built with Emily would unravel in the cruelest way. Betrayal settled over him like a suffocating fog. He had always prided himself on being a good husband. He worked tirelessly as a contractor, making sure their home was more than just four walls. It was a sanctuary for their family. He was present, attentive, loving, or at least he thought he was. But somewhere along the way, Emily had slipped through his fingers. He had noticed the change months ago. The secret phone calls, the sudden interest in her appearance, the way she distanced herself from him in bed. At first, he chalked it up to stress. People went through rough patches, didn't they? But then came the unexplained absences, the way she recoiled from his touch, and the undeniable glow in her eyes when she thought he wasn't watching. Tonight was the confirmation he never wanted. Emily walked into the bedroom wearing a dress he hadn't seen in years. It was tight, hugging her curves in a way that screamed seduction. Her perfume was stronger than usual. Her lips painted a shade of red he had once loved. But what cut him the most was the look in her eyes. Excited, almost giddy, like a schoolgirl with a crush. She leaned in, pressing a hand to his chest, her breath warm against his ear. "Jake, I need to feel young and wild again tonight." The words dripped with an intoxicating thrill. But that thrill wasn't for him. Emily turned away before she could see the flicker of devastation cross his face, before she could see the rage simmering beneath the surface. What she didn't know was that Jake had already packed her bags. What she didn't know was that her wild night was about to become her worst nightmare. Jake hadn't wanted to believe it at first. The thought of Emily betraying him was unthinkable. But when the signs became too obvious to ignore, he started watching, listening, gathering the pieces of the puzzle. It started with the phone calls late at night when she thought he was asleep. She'd sneak into the bathroom, whispering into the receiver. He couldn't always make out the words, but the hushed giggles, the flirtatious tones, they cut through him like a blade. Then came a text one night while Emily was in the shower. Jake picked up her phone. She was careless enough to leave it unlocked. His heart pounded as he scrolled through her messages. "Can't wait to see you tonight. I've missed your hands on me." Jake's blood ran cold. The message wasn't meant for him. And then the pictures. Emily in lingerie, posing in ways she never did for him anymore. The images burned into his brain like a brand, an agonizing reminder that the woman he loved was giving herself to another man. He could have confronted her then, could have screamed, shattered the illusion right there in the bathroom. But no, Jake was a patient man, and he wasn't going to let her walk away that easily. Instead, he started planning. Emily wasn't the only one with a secret. Jake wasn't the only one who had been betrayed. Through careful investigation, he uncovered the identity of her lover, Mark Calloway, a wealthy businessman with a reputation for being charming, successful, and married. Jake did something Emily never saw coming. He reached out to Mark's wife. Her name was Victoria, and when she answered his call, he could hear the exhaustion in her voice, the weariness of a woman who had also been suspecting, also been hurting. "Who is this?" she asked. "My name is Jake Thompson. My wife is sleeping with your husband." Silence. Then a shaky breath. "I knew it," Victoria whispered. I didn't want to believe it." Neither of them spoke for a moment, the weight of their mutual betrayal sinking in. "We can expose them," Jake said. Together, a plan began to take shape. That was when Jake stopped feeling like a victim and started preparing for war. Emily thought tonight would be the best night of her life. She had no idea it would be the night her world came crashing down. Jake didn't confront her before she left. He didn't ask her where she was going. He simply watched as she carefully applied her makeup, adjusted her dress, and spritzed on her expensive perfume. "I might be home late," she said casually, slipping into her heels. "Take your time," Jake replied with a smile. She mistook his calmness for indifference. She thought he was clueless. She had no idea that as she walked out the door, she was walking into a trap. Jake waited until she was gone. Then he did what needed to be done. He gathered her suitcases, the ones he had packed earlier, filled with her clothes, her sentimental belongings, the remnants of their life together. He changed the locks. And then he drove to the restaurant where Emily and Mark were supposed to meet, where Victoria was already waiting. Emily arrived at the restaurant with a smile on her face, anticipation buzzing in her veins. But the moment she stepped inside, she knew something was wrong. The romantic setting she had imagined was ruined by the sight of Victoria Calloway sitting at the table where Mark should have been. In front of her, a thick folder of divorce papers. Emily barely had time to process before the door swung open behind her. And there stood Jake. Calm, collected, a storm brewing in his eyes. The restaurant fell silent as the realization hit her. This wasn't a date. This was an execution. Her stomach dropped. She turned to Mark, who had just arrived, only to be met with Victoria's furious glare. "You two think you're so clever." Victoria's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "You thought you could betray us and walk away unscathed." Mark paled. "Victoria, save it!" she snapped, throwing the divorce papers at him. "Sign these. We're done." Emily turned to Jake, her voice barely above a whisper. "Jake, please." "Please what?" he asked, tilting his head. "Please forgive you? Please let you come home?" He chuckled darkly. "Oh, sweetheart, you don't have a home anymore." Emily's breath hitched. "What do you mean?" "I packed your bags." Jake's smile was razor sharp. "Change the locks. You wanted to feel wild and free, right?" He gestured towards the door. "Go be free, just not in my house." Gasps filled the restaurant. Emily stumbled back, her world spinning. "Jake, please, I made a mistake." "No, Emily," Jake said, stepping closer, his voice low and lethal. "You made a choice, and now you get to live with it." Tears welled in her eyes, but it was too late. Jake had already turned his back. And just like that, the life she had destroyed collapsed around her. But this was only the beginning. Emily stood frozen in the restaurant, her heart pounding like a drum inside her chest. The weight of the stares, the gasps of onlookers, the cold fury in Jake's eyes, it all crashed down on her like a tidal wave. Her hands trembled as she reached for Jake, her mind scrambling for an excuse, a justification, anything that would make this nightmare go away. "Jake, please just let me explain," she whispered, voice cracking. He didn't even turn to look at her. "Explain what?" His voice was eerily calm, yet there was an underlying steel that made the hairs on her arms stand up. "That you spent months sneaking around behind my back? That you let another man touch you while I was home building a life for us?" His words struck like a blade, each one slicing away at her defense, leaving her raw and exposed. "It wasn't like that," she tried, stepping forward. Jake turned to her then, his eyes dark and unreadable. He let out a bitter laugh. "It wasn't like that?" His tone dripped with mockery. "So what was it like, Emily? Were you just experimenting? Was this all some kind of game to you?" She swallowed hard, tears welling up in her eyes. This wasn't how the night was supposed to go. She was supposed to be wrapped in Mark's arms, sharing a glass of wine, escaping the dull routine of her life. She never thought she'd be exposed like this. "Save it!" Jake's voice cut through her like ice, final and unwavering. Emily wasn't used to this version of him. The Jake she had always known was patient, understanding, sometimes too understanding. But now there was nothing but cold detachment in his eyes. She turned to Mark, her supposed lover, looking for some kind of lifeline. But he was no better. Mark sat there silent, his jaw clenched tight as his wife Victoria loomed over him, her perfectly manicured nails tapping on the table. "You're going to sign those papers," Victoria said, her voice smooth but full of venom. "And you're going to do it right now." Mark didn't move. "Or," Victoria continued, leaning in closer, "I can forward all the little texts and pictures you sent my husband to your company. Your board of directors would love to know what their CEO does on his lunch breaks, wouldn't they?" The color drained from Mark's face. Emily's stomach twisted. This wasn't just a simple breakup. This was a massacre. Victoria, please, Mark finally spoke, his voice shaking. Oh, now you want to talk? Victoria let out a sharp laugh. You didn't have much to say when you were sneaking around behind my back, did you? She shoved the divorce papers toward him. Sign it. Mark hesitated for only a second before reaching for the pen. His hand was shaking as he scribbled his name across the page. It was over. Everything. Emily felt her breath coming in short gasps, her mind racing. She turned to Jake again, desperate. Jake, we can fix this. Please don't do this. For the first time that night, something flickered across his face. Pain. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. You already did this, Emily. His voice was softer now, but still distant. The moment you chose him over me, you did this. And then, with one final look, he turned and walked away. Emily drove home in a daze, her hands gripping the wheel so tight her knuckles turned white. Everything felt surreal. One moment, she was on top of the world, ready to escape into the arms of a man who made her feel alive. And now she had nothing. She pulled into the driveway, desperate to collapse into the familiarity of her home, to find some comfort in the place where she and Jake had built their life together. But when she stepped out of the car, her heart stopped. Her suitcases were sitting on the front porch, the porch light illuminating them in a way that made the whole scene feel cruelly theatrical. Panic surged through her as she rushed to the door, fumbling for her keys. She twisted the handle. It didn't budge. Emily's breath hitched. She tried again, jiggling it harder. Locked. Her eyes darted to the lock. A new lock. Jake had changed the locks. No, 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 she whispered, stepping back in disbelief. She banged on the door, her heart hammering. Jake, open the door. Please don't do this. Silence. Desperation clawed at her throat. She pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling as she called him. The line rang once, twice, then straight to voicemail. A sob broke from her lips. This wasn't real. This couldn't be happening. Jake, please, she cried into the phone. I'm sorry, okay? I made a mistake. I was stupid. Please just let me in. Let's talk. She waited, holding her breath, hoping, praying that he would listen. But the seconds dragged on, and there was no response. Her knees felt weak. And then the final blow. A text popped up on her screen from Jake. Your things are outside. Take them and go. The words hit her like a slap. This wasn't just a fight. This was final. Jake was done. Her legs gave out, and she sank onto the porch, the realization sinking in like an unbearable weight. She had spent so long chasing something new, something exciting, that she never stopped to think about what she was throwing away. Now she had nothing. No home, no husband, no one to come back to. The world she had so carelessly destroyed had finally crumbled around her, and there was no fixing it. Emily sat on the cold porch, staring blankly at the bags in front of her. The same bags she had packed and unpacked countless times before. Vacations, business trips, weekend getaways. But this time, they weren't a symbol of adventure. They were a death sentence. A death sentence to her marriage, her home, her entire life. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through her phone. She called Jake again, straight to voicemail. She texted him, Jake, please just let me in. Let's talk. Nothing. She tried again. I made a mistake, okay? I was stupid, but we can fix this. I love you. Still nothing. A hollow pit formed in her stomach. She had taken Jake for granted for so long, assuming he would always be there, waiting, loving, forgiving. But tonight, for the first time in 15 years, she realized something. She had lost him. And there was no getting him back. A gust of wind hit her, sending a shiver down her spine. She was still in her dress, still wearing the perfume she had put on for Mark. The realization made her sick. Mark, she had to call him. He would know what to do. Her phone vibrated. For a second, hope flickered in her chest. Maybe it was Jake. Maybe he had changed his mind. But when she looked at the screen, her heart plummeted. Mark Calloway. Don't call me. My wife is furious. This is over. Emily's vision blurred. No, no. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. She had risked everything for him. She had ruined her life for him. And now, when she needed him the most, he was just abandoning her. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Mark, please. I have nowhere to go. The message sent. She waited and waited. And then, blocked. Emily stared at the screen in disbelief. This couldn't be happening. But it was. She was truly, utterly alone. Tears slipped down her cheeks. She buried her face in her hands, her mind spinning, desperately trying to figure out where to go. She had lost everything in a single night, and she had no one to blame but herself. Inside the house, Jake sat in the dark, staring at his phone. The missed calls, the messages. He could feel the desperation in Emily's words. For a fleeting moment, the man he once was, the man who loved her, who had built a life with her, wanted to open the door, wanted to let her in. But then he remembered the nights he had waited up for her, wondering where she was. The texts he had read, the lies she had told, the image of her dressed up, whispering in his ear that she needed to feel young and wild again. The anger surged back, drowning out the weakness. He deleted every message. Then, with a deep breath, he blocked her number. She had made her choice, and now she had to live with it. For the first time in months, Jake felt a sense of peace. He wasn't the one suffering anymore, she was. And this was only the beginning. Emily spent the night in her car, curled up in the back seat, using her coat as a blanket. The world outside was quiet, but inside, her mind was screaming. She kept replaying the night over and over again, unable to process how quickly everything had fallen apart. Jake wasn't supposed to react this way. Mark wasn't supposed to abandon her. She was supposed to have options. But she had none. Her parents? No. They had never approved of her choices, and she wasn't about to crawl back to them. Her friends? Most of them were Jake's friends, and she knew they wouldn't take her side. She had no money. Jake had handled most of the finances, and now that he had locked her out, she was left with whatever cash was in her purse. Panic clawed at her chest. For the first time in her life, she had nothing, and she had no idea what to do next. Jake woke up the next morning feeling lighter than he had in years. The house was quiet, peaceful. No more late-night phone calls from Emily. No more tension. No more lies. He took his time making coffee, savoring the silence. Then his phone buzzed. Victoria. He smirked. Good morning, he answered. How does it feel? She asked. Jake chuckled. Like a weight has been lifted. Victoria sighed. Same here. Mark spent the night at a hotel. He knows better than to come home. I think he finally understands that I'm serious. Jake leaned back in his chair. So what happens now? Victoria's voice took on a sharp edge. Now? Now we make sure they don't recover from this. Jake's smile grew. He liked the way she thought. Emily had never truly felt desperation until today. She had been living in a bubble for so long, believed she could always get what she wanted. But as she sat in a dingy motel room, staring at her reflection in the cracked mirror, she realized she was nothing without Jake. She needed him. She needed to fix this. Her hand shook as she picked up her phone. Jake had blocked her, but she knew where he worked, and she wasn't above begging. Jake was in his office when he heard a commotion outside, then his assistant's hesitant voice. Mr. Thompson, there's a woman here asking to see you. He didn't need to ask who it was. A slow smirk crossed his face. Send her in. Emily walked in, her eyes red and swollen, her once flawless dress wrinkled. Jake, please, she whispered. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. What do you want, Emily? Her lip trembled. I want to come home. Jake studied her, enjoying the sight of her crumbling. Home? He echoed. You mean my home? The one you walked away from? She flinched. I made a mistake, she said quickly. I know that. I wasn't thinking. I was stupid. You were stupid, he agreed. A flicker of hope appeared in her eyes. So we can fix this? Jake's expression darkened. No, Emily. We can't. Her face crumpled. Jake, please. He stood up, towering over her. You wanted excitement, Emily. You wanted to feel young and wild. He smirked. Well, go find it. But you're not getting another second of my life. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but Jake was done. He walked to the door and held it open. Goodbye, Emily. And just like that, she was out of his life for good. Emily stumbled out of Jake's office, her head spinning, her stomach hollow. She had never seen him like that before. Cold, unforgiving, unmoved. The man she had once loved, the man she had built a life with, was gone. And it was all her fault. She walked aimlessly through the city, the weight of everything crashing down on her. She had nowhere to go, no money, no safety net. Her first instinct was to call Mark, to beg him to take her in. But then she remembered. Blocked. She had thrown away a man who loved her for a man who discarded her like trash. Her legs felt weak as she reached a small park bench and collapsed onto it. Her phone was still in her shaking hands. Maybe she could call her parents? No. They had warned her. They had always said Jake was the best thing that ever happened to her. She had ignored them. And now she was truly alone. A sob escaped her lips. For the first time in her life, she understood regret. Jake didn't feel guilty. Not one bit. For years, he had been the devoted husband, the provider, the man who gave everything, and she had thrown it away. Now, he was free. And for the first time in years, he felt alive. He spent the next few weeks focusing on himself, hitting the gym, reconnecting with friends, finding himself again. The best part? Victoria. They had started texting more, meeting for drinks, bonding over their shared betrayal. She was nothing like Emily. She was smart, confident, loyal. Jake found himself drawn to her in ways he never expected. One night over dinner, Victoria leaned in and smirked. Do you ever wonder if they regret it? Jake took a sip of his whiskey. Oh, I know they do. Emily's life collapsed. She bounced between cheap motels and friends' couches, clinging to whatever scrap she could find. But one by one, people started pulling away. Nobody wanted to deal with a woman who destroyed her own marriage for nothing. She tried looking for work, but without Jake's financial stability, she struggled. She started drinking. At first, just a little, then more. She thought about calling Jake again, but she knew he wouldn't answer. She had burned that bridge, and now she was drowning in the consequences. One night, Emily sat alone in a dimly lit bar, drowning in whiskey, when she saw him. Mark, with another woman, laughing, smiling like she had never existed. Emily's stomach twisted. After everything they had done, after everything she had lost for him, he had already moved on. Something inside her snapped. She grabbed her drink, marched over, and threw it in his face. You ruined my life, she hissed. Mark wiped the liquor from his face, glaring at her. You ruined your own life, Emily. I never promised you anything. She felt like the ground had been ripped from beneath her. He didn't care. He had never cared, and now she had nothing left. Jake sat across from Victoria, sipping his drink, feeling at peace. Emily had tried to reach out a few more times, but he ignored every message. He didn't need to respond. He had won. She had lost everything. Her home, her reputation, her fake lover. And he? He had moved on. Victoria smiled at him, her eyes warm. You did the right thing, you know. Jake smirked. I know. For the first time in a long time, he was finally happy. And Emily? She sat outside Jake's house, staring at the door one last time. One last chance. She knocked. Minutes passed before the door opened. Jake stood there, looking down at her, completely unfazed. What do you want, Emily? Her voice trembled. I have nowhere else to go. Jake sighed. That's not my problem anymore. Her heart shattered. Please, Jake, I love you. For a moment, she saw something in his eyes. Then he shook his head. No, Emily. You love what I gave you, not me. And with that, he shut the door for good. Jake stood by the window, watching as Emily finally walked away. For the first time in months, he felt light. The past was behind him. And the future? It was his to build. Victoria walked up beside him, slipping her hand into his. Ready? She asked. Jake smiled. More than ever. And as they walked away, leaving the past behind, Jake knew one thing for certain. Revenge had never tasted so sweet.